Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Practice English TV. I'm Mark, and it's really nice to have you here with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. Thanks for listening. Maybe you're relaxing, maybe you're studying, or maybe you're just taking a quiet moment for yourself.
Yeah, wherever you are, we're glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about something very personal, but also very familiar to everyone.
We're talking about family, the people we grow up with, live with, and share everyday life with.
It's a simple topic, but it can bring up a lot of feelings and memories.
Yeah, and everyone's family is a little different, which makes it even more interesting to talk about.
We're just going to have a natural conversation, share some small stories, and explore how people talk about family in daily life.
So just relax, listen, and enjoy the conversation. You don't need to understand everything.
If you enjoy learning English with us, feel free to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends.
Thank you so much for being here and learning with us today. Let's begin and talk about your family together.
All right, let's get started. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. Family is one of those topics that sounds simple, but when you really think about it, it's actually very deep.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone has a different experience with family, but at the same time, there are so many things we all share.
Like small daily moments, eating together, talking in the evening, or even just sitting in the same room doing different things.
Exactly. Those little moments don't seem important at the time, but later they become really meaningful memories.
When people talk about family in English, they usually start with simple things, like how many people are in your family.
Right. Someone might say, I have a small family, or I come from a big family.
And then they might talk about each person, like I have one brother and one sister, or I live with my parents.
Here's a small situation. Imagine someone asks you, do you live with your family?
You might say, yes, I live with my parents, or no, I live alone now.
Both answers are very common, depending on your life situation.
Another thing people often talk about is their relationship with family members.
Yeah, like saying, I'm very close to my mom, or my brother and I don't talk much.
That second one sounds a bit serious, but it's very real.
Yeah, not every family is perfect, and that's okay.
Let me share a quick story. When I was younger, my family always had dinner together.
Every day?
Almost every day. And honestly, sometimes I didn't want to sit there. I just wanted to go to my room.
That sounds very familiar.
But now, when I think back, those dinners were really important. We talked about our day, shared small things. It felt simple, but it meant a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting how your feelings about family change over time.
Here's another situation. You're talking to a friend and they ask, "What does your dad do?"
You might answer, he's a teacher, or he works in an office.
Simple answers, but they help people understand your background a little more.
Something else I notice is that in some cultures, people talk about extended family more often.
Yeah, like grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins.
In some places, it's very normal to live close to them or even in the same house.
While in other places, people might move far away and only visit during holidays.
And then family gatherings become a big event.
Yeah, lots of food, lots of talking, sometimes a little chaos.
A little chaos is a good way to describe it.
But that's also part of what makes family special.
Exactly. It's not always perfect, but it's real and full of emotion.
So when we talk about family, we're not just talking about people.
We're talking about relationships, habits, memories, and everyday life.
And that's what makes this topic so interesting to explore.
Yeah, because everyone listening probably has their own story similar.
All right, let's keep going and share some real-life experiences about family. Here's something a lot of people experience: small, everyday moments with family that don't seem important at first, but later they stay with you.
Yeah, those quiet, normal moments often become the ones we remember the most.
I have a simple story about my mom. When I was in school, she used to wake me up every morning.
That already sounds familiar.
Yeah, but the funny part is I never woke up the first time she called me.
Of course not.
She would say, "Mark, wake up." And I'd say, "Okay," but then I'd fall asleep again.
That okay doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. She had to come back 2 or 3 times. Sometimes she even turned on the lights.
That's when you know it's serious.
Yeah, and back then I found it annoying. I just wanted to sleep more.
But now it probably feels different when you think about it.
It does. Now I see it as care. She was making sure I didn't miss school.
That's a really nice realization.
What about you? Do you have a small family story like that?
Yeah, actually. When I was younger, my family had this habit of eating together every Sunday.
Every Sunday. That's nice.
Yeah, it was like a routine. My dad would cook, my mom would prepare the table, and I would help a little, or at least try to.
Try to sounds important there.
Yeah, sometimes I just stood there and watched.
What did you usually talk about?
Just simple things, school, work, or something funny that happened during the week.
Those conversations are really meaningful.
Yeah, and now that I don't live with them anymore, I actually miss those Sundays.
That's something many people experience. You don't always realize the value of those moments until later.
Here's a small situation. Imagine you're talking to a friend and they ask, "Do you see your family often?"
You might say, "Not really, I'm busy with work." Or, "Yes, I visit them every weekend."
Both answers are very real and depend on your life.
Another situation is calling your family.
Yeah, like a quick phone call with your parents.
Sometimes the conversation is very simple. Did you eat? How was your day?
Those are classic questions.
And sometimes you don't have anything big to say, but the call still feels important.
Exactly. It's not about the topic, it's about staying connected.
I also notice small differences in how people talk about family in different cultures.
Yeah, in some places, people talk about their parents very openly and often.
While in other places, people might be a bit more private.
And even the way people show care can be different.
For example, some parents say, "I love you," often.
And others show it through actions like cooking or helping with daily things.
Like making sure you wake up on time.
Yeah, exactly, like your story.
All these small experiences are part of family life.
They may seem simple, but they carry a lot of meaning.
And when you share these stories in English, you don't need complicated words.
Simple sentences are enough to express real feelings.
That's what makes these conversations so natural.
Yeah, and everyone listening probably has similar moments in their own life.
So now let's slow things down a bit and look at some useful words you can use when talking about family. Let's slow down a bit and talk about some common words people use when they talk about family.
Yeah, these are simple words, but you'll hear them all the time in real conversations.
Let's start with the basics. The word parents means your mother and your father.
And if you want to be more specific, you can say my mom or my dad.
Some people also say mother and father, but in daily conversation, mom and dad sound more natural.
Now, let's talk about siblings. Siblings means your brothers and sisters.
So you can say, "I have 2 siblings," or more clearly, "I have 1 brother and 1 sister."
Here's a small situation. Someone asks you, "Do you have any siblings?"
You can answer, "Yes, I have a younger sister," or "No, I'm an only child."
Only child means you don't have any brothers or sisters.
Now let's move to extended family.
This includes people like grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins.
For example, grandparents are your mom's or dad's parents.
And cousins are the children of your aunt or uncle.
Here's another situation. Someone asks, "Are you close to your family?"
You might say, "Yes, I'm very close to my family." Or, "Not really, we don't talk much."
The phrase "close to" is very important. It doesn't mean distance, it means emotional connection.
Right, you can live far away but still feel close to your family.
Now let's talk about daily life. People often say, "I live with my family."
Or, "I live alone," or "I live with my parents."
Another common phrase is "spend time with."
For example, I like to spend time with my family on weekends.
That's a very natural sentence.
Let me share a short example. I sometimes say, I call my parents every week.
That's a good one. It shows connection even if you don't live together.
Yeah, and the sentence is very simple, but it says a lot.
Another useful word is relationship.
You can say, I have a good relationship with my sister, or my relationship with my brother is a little complicated.
That word helps you talk about feelings and connection.
Here's one more small situation. Someone asks, what does your mom do?
You can answer, she's a teacher, or she works at a hospital.
Simple, clear, and very natural.
So, as you can see, talking about family doesn't require difficult vocabulary.
Most of the time, people use simple words and short sentences.
And the meaning comes from your experience and your feelings.
Exactly. That's what makes these conversations feel real.
Now that we have these words, we can start using them more naturally.
Yeah, let's try putting them into a real conversation together.
Here's something that can really help. When you talk about your family, you don't need long or complicated sentences. Simple phrases are more than enough.
Yeah, and these phrases are very natural. People use them all the time in everyday conversations.
Let's start with a very common one. I come from a small family.
Or, I come from a big family. That's usually one of the first things people say.
Another simple phrase is, I live with my parents.
Or, I live alone now, especially if you've moved out.
Here's a small situation. Someone asks, who do you live with?
You can answer, I live with my parents, or I live with my brother.
Very simple, very clear.
Now let's talk about relationships. A common phrase is, I'm very close to my family.
Or you can say, I'm really close to my mom.
And if it's a bit different, you might say, we're not very close, but we talk sometimes.
That sounds honest and natural.
Here's another situation. Someone asks, do you see your family often?
You can say, yes, I see them every weekend.
Or, not really, I'm pretty busy with work.
Both are very common answers.
Now, let's talk about daily habits. You can say, I call my parents every week.
Or we usually have dinner together.
Those kinds of sentences show your routine and connection.
Let me share a small example. Sometimes I say, my mom always asks if I've eaten.
That's such a universal thing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how old you are.
Another useful phrase is, my dad gives me advice.
Or my sister helps me a lot.
These phrases help you talk about support and care.
Here's another situation. Someone asks, what is your family like?
You can say, they're very friendly, or they're a bit quiet.
Or even, they're a little strict.
That's a good one. It feels very real.
Now let's look at a slightly longer phrase. We don't always agree, but we care about each other.
That sounds very natural and honest.
Because family relationships are not always perfect.
Exactly, and that's okay.
Here's one more small situation. Someone asks, do you spend time with your family?
You can say, yes, we spend time together on weekends.
Or, we don't have much time, but we try.
That we try part feels very real.
Another helpful phrase is, I miss my family.
Especially if you live far away.
You can also say, I visit them when I can.
That shows effort and connection.
Sometimes people also say, my family is very important to me.
Simple sentence, but strong meaning.
It's interesting how simple words can carry so much feeling.
Yeah, you don't need complicated English to express real emotions.
So when you talk about your family, just keep it simple and honest.
That's the best way to sound natural.
And the more you use these phrases, the more comfortable you'll feel.
Let's keep going and talk about some practical tips and a simple way to practice speaking about your family.
I want to take a moment to talk about something important. When people talk about family in English, they usually keep things simple but meaningful.
Yeah, it's not about using big words. It's more about being clear and honest.
For example, when you say, I'm close to my family, you're not giving a lot of details, but people understand the feeling.
Right, that one sentence already tells a story about your relationship.
Here's a small situation. Someone asks you, "Are you close to your parents?"
You might pause for a second and think about it.
And then you say, "Yeah, I talk to them a lot."
That answer is simple, but it feels very natural.
Another thing people often do is give small examples instead of long explanations.
Like saying, my mom calls me every day, or my dad always checks on me.
Those details help the listener understand your family without complicated language.
Exactly, you're showing, not explaining too much.
Let me share a short example. If I say, "My brother and I don't talk much," it sounds simple.
But it can mean many things.
Yeah, maybe we're busy, or maybe we're just different people.
And you don't always need to explain everything.
Another thing I notice is that people often talk about habits when they describe family.
That's true. Habits make the story feel real.
For example, we eat dinner together, or we watch TV every night.
Those are small actions, but they show connection.
Here's another situation. Someone asks, "What do you usually do with your family?"
You can answer, we usually have dinner together, or we go out on weekends.
Again, simple structure but clear meaning.
There's also something interesting about how people express feelings.
Yeah, not everyone says things like, "I love my family," directly.
In some cultures, people express care through actions instead of words.
Like cooking, helping, or just being there.
Like making sure you wake up on time.
Yeah, that kind of care.
So when you talk about family in English, you don't have to copy one style.
You can speak in a way that matches your own experience.
That's very important. Your story is your own.
Another helpful idea is to keep your sentences flexible.
For example, instead of saying something very long, you can break it into two shorter sentences.
Like, "I live far from my family, but I call them often."
That sounds natural and easy to understand.
Here's one more small situation. You're talking to someone new and they ask about your family.
You don't need to say everything at once.
You can start simple. "I have a small family."
And then add more if you feel comfortable.
Exactly. Conversation is a process, not a test.
That's a good way to think about it.
So overall, the key idea is very simple.
Use clear words, short sentences, and real examples.
And focus on sharing your experience, not being perfect.
That's what makes your English feel natural and human.
All right, let's wrap things up with a few final thoughts and a simple question for you to practice. Before we finish, let's go over a few simple ideas that can help you feel more comfortable when talking about your family in English.
Yeah, nothing complicated, just small things you can use in real conversations.
First, try to keep your sentences simple. You don't need to say everything at once.
Exactly. You can start with something like, I have a small family, and then add more details later.
Another helpful tip is to talk about real life. Think about your daily habits with your family.
For example, I call my parents every week, or we eat dinner together.
These kinds of sentences are easy to say, but they feel very natural.
Here's a small situation. Someone asks you, what do you usually do with your family?
You can pause, think for a moment, and then give a simple answer.
Like, we spend time together on weekends, or we don't see each other often, but we stay in touch.
Both answers are clear and honest.
Another tip is to not worry too much about mistakes.
Yeah, even if your sentence is not perfect, people will still understand you.
Communication is more important than perfect grammar.
Here's another situation. You forget a word while speaking.
Instead of stopping, you can explain it in a simple way.
Or you can pause, take a breath, and continue.
That's a very natural part of speaking.
Now let's give you a small question to practice.
Think about your family.
How many people are in your family?
And who are you closest to?
You can answer with simple sentences.
And if you'd like, you can write your answers in English in the comments.
That's a great way to practice and connect with other learners.
You can keep it short, just 1 or 2 sentences is enough.
For example, I have 4 people in my family. I'm closest to my mom.
That's already a great answer.
And the more you practice, the more confident you'll feel.
Little by little, it becomes easier and more natural.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
We really hope this conversation helped you feel more comfortable talking about your family.
And maybe it also made you think about your own experiences.
Yeah, those small moments that make family life special.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care and keep practicing.